What's going on, collective listeners? Welcome back for another episode. We always appreciate you guys tuning in, as always. David Ventress is my guest today. He's the director of athletic performance for the University of South Alabama, working with men's basketball down there. So he's been a few different places: Tulane, Nicholls State, FAU. He's got some great experiences. Specifically, one of the major takeaways that we kind of discussed today was like the lens that he looks through coaching. It's unbelievable, really. It was kind of just like, oh, like this is the purest form of coaching the strength and conditioning provides. So I'm interested for you guys to be able to be able to hear that and obviously hear his take on that, good and bad, right, as far as what the field is offering right now. And then we kind of get into some specific stories that he has with his athletes, how he's actually able to impact them, and the types of relationships that he's developing with these athletes who are now viewing training in a completely different light, and what he's able to provide to them from a professional and a personal standpoint. So good episode today. Let's get into it. What's going on, collective listeners? Welcome back to another episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Grasso. Today, we are here with David Ventress Jr., who's the director of athletic performance at the University of South Alabama. I believe it was where did we cross? Where were you when was it when you were down at was it Nicholls or something like that? When we crossed paths? Yeah. So it was like, yeah. So, I think it was like through Zoom during that like COVID period and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, this is awesome, man. I'm pumped. Appreciate you hopping on the podcast. Obviously you've elevated, right? And you kind of moved around a little bit since we last spoke. So now you're the director of athletic performance, which, sounds super fancy. So obviously we are among greatness. We are among a fancy ass dude today. So, why don't you introduce yourself, David? Let everybody know who you are and what you're doing. And then why don't you tell us your story? You know what I mean? Tell us like how far this thing goes back and how it led to where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure, man. First off, man, I just appreciate you having me on, man. Some real good stuff there. You've talked to some real good dudes, some views that I look up to in the industry. So for me to come on this, man, I really appreciate it. But yeah, like I said, director of men's basketball athletic performance. So I just do men's basketball here at South. So before here, my journey actually started off at Tulane University. So this is what I actually got my foot in the door for actual strength conditioning. So director, Coach Kyle Spear, I was under him. He hired me as an intern on his staff. Really got close to his assistants, really got exposed to really sort of the stuff that comes with collegiate football strength conditioning. So from there, I was able to work my way up. Made great relationships with the assistants. They actually got me to my first connection was at Nicholls State, which was actually where we met. So Coach Greg Carasquillo, who's the director there. He hired me under his staff. So I was a GA, paid intern type role. And that was the first time I actually got to experience, a lead of teams, you know what I mean? So I was responsible for 3 teams and then also assisted with football, baseball, basketball, things like that. So, in terms of development, a lot of my development came from Coach Greg and the guys that I was around from there. He's one of the best minds that I consider in strength and conditioning. Like you said, man, he brought us together, during that COVID time when everything was shut down. We hopped on a bunch of Zoom calls with people, and led to different connections and things like that. That's where I met you. And it was also where I met my next guy. So Coach Joey Garasio down at FAU. He reached out to me whenever he had a position open, went through the interview process and everything like that. And I was actually able to get hired on his staff as an assistant, so for Tulane football, we have 4 assistants, a great staff, great group of guys that I work with, all under Coach Joey, and Coach Joey, I consider one of the masterminds, mad scientists you consider in strength and conditioning. He's one of the best followers on social media. Definitely one of the best guys in the industry, in my opinion. He's one of the top in the country. He's the best at what he does, and in terms of training, in terms of development as a coach and as a person, a lot came from there because it really just opened up my eye in terms of why we do things, why training is important, and why it's important to establish yourself as a person, as a coach. So, I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. I was there for 8 months to try to soak up as much knowledge as I could from that guy. Like I say, he's a great mind, great dude in the industry. And then from there, opportunity came up here at South for men's basketball. This is actually my roots. This is a sport I played. This is a sport I've been around. So I knew I definitely wanted to get back to basketball. I knew that for sure. I just didn't know when and how that was going to happen. So once this opportunity came up, I jumped on it right away. Went through the interview process, and the rest is history. So this is 8 months here. I'll make a year in November. So this is my first off season this summer. But it's been great. It's been great, great 8 months, and it's good to be around basketball again.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's pretty cool. Actually, I was thinking about that yesterday. I had another guest on the podcast who is now coaching and working with a sport that she used to play. Right. So it's like there is that level of, because it's funny. I think when most of us get involved in strength and conditioning, like you're probably going to be working with sports that you've never worked with before, because you can't, like, it's the likelihood that because you're going to be working with a variety of teams, and the likelihood that you played all of those sports is is not high. Right. So I think, I mean, unless you're just, like, I don't know, unless you're like Bo Jackson or something like that. Right. Like it's like you're probably not doing everything, but that's cool, man. That's awesome to hear that you're actually able to like get back into the sport. So it's probably a lot easier for you to connect with some of the athletes that you're working with as well, because, I think that's part of, right, like being an athlete is them being like, hey, like this guy's, I know where he's coming from. You know what I mean? Like he knows, he knows where I'm at too. Right. Is that kind of what you feel so far, that you've been able to connect with some of the athletes there?
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I mean, it's a sport I'm familiar with. You know what I'm saying? Like football, like I didn't play it that much. I played a little bit in high school, but that was it. But just like sort of stuff that you can just relate to the guys more, and some of the things, the demands of the sport, obviously it's going to be better. I don't think you have to play every single sport you come in contact with in terms of strength and conditioning, but it does help. It does help just from a buy-in standpoint, just from getting your guys to trust you, and all in all, just being more interactive with the guys and the staff. You know what I mean? Like I'm at every single workout, I'm at every single skills session and things like that. Just there with the guys, just being around basketball. So this is retirement for me. You know what I mean? So
that's interesting too, though, because I'm starting to see that a little bit more. And like, it's not, I don't know if it's like super new, but the idea of like strength coaches actually being involved in like skill sessions and obviously on the floor during practice and things like that. And, when I first saw that, I was like, yo, that's sick. Like, I think that that's something that makes a lot of sense. Obviously it creates a little bit more synergy, a little more collaboration. Right. And, like there's probably a ton of buy-in, right? Like, and I used to try to do that in the reverse, where like when I was coaching, I think it was like, I was working with women's lax, right? I used to try to have some of our like movement skill sessions. I'm like, why isn't the sport coach out here? Like, these are like, we're all coaching movement, right? So if that's the idea, like they should be out there during this, strength and conditioning session, right? With the air quotes, right? Because it was like, we always kind of like differentiate like training from like practice or whatever, but like and working out and whatever it is, right? So it's like, but that's obviously not the case, right? At the end of the day, we're all coaching movement. So you want to kind of like, walk me through that a little bit, like what your thoughts were. Was that the first time, like at South Alabama, is that the first time you've been exposed, like being involved in some of the practice sessions, some of the skill sessions that are taking place and having that type of input? And what do you think like some of the benefits are from being able to do something like that?
Yeah, it's not exactly the first time. At FAU, we're pretty involved with our guys too. You know what I'm saying? Like we try to be around as much as we could, because I mean, at the end of the day, like it just creates unity in everything. You know what I'm saying? Between sports coaches, between athletic trainers, strength coaches, everybody, we're on the same page. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the development of the athlete.
No doubt.
For us, we were always involved with stuff. Here at South, I'm one of the ones that are first to actually be involved in some of the stuff. Like, oh wow, we never had a strength coach that actually comes and watches this. Like, like I want to see everything. You know what I mean? Like I want to see, if guys are moving better, exactly. How the movements that we do in conditioning and speed work, things like that. Like how are they actually looking on the court? Because we always have coaches come up and say, hey man, he's moving better. Like, he's moving faster and he's jumping. Like I want to see it. You know what I mean? Like all right, I want to go out there. I want to see how he's doing. I want to see how slow he is.
Nice.
Moving his speed, if he's guarding the ball better and things like that. So, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that transfer to sport, So that's what I consider important, and that's what I promote. So I definitely want to be there for when it happens,
Yeah, absolutely. And then same could probably work in reverse too, where it's like if you have a coach who's, I don't want to say like providing like criticism or whatever, but it's more so like being evaluative in the sense that like he's assessing a player who may not be moving in the way that you would like he likes, right? Like there's a lot, like I think that's like a tough part, like about like it's one of the most challenging pieces of working in collegiate athletics is like, let's be honest, like a lot of it is based off of like the eye test, and obviously our eyes deceive us at all times. You know what I mean? Like these things happen all the time. So I think there's like this ability where it's like if a coach is like, hey, like this, this guy just doesn't like, you hear it all the time, like he just doesn't have that pop or that like juice, right? Like he doesn't have that like that I think like the word they use like twitch or something like that. And it's like, well, what are we actually talking about here? Like, are we like physically talking? Are we talking about like a legitimate like physical barrier? Is it something that's psychological, right? Like, is he not moving fast because he doesn't know the play, right? And he doesn't understand, you know what I mean? And like, he's a little bit more hesitant, right? And he knows he's like in his own head, he's like, I don't know this play. So he can't feel the ability to move freely. He doesn't know the scheme or whatever the case may be. Maybe he doesn't have the technique to actually like express some of the physical ability he has. So like, I think like, it's good though. You know what I mean? Have you come across a situation like that where you feel like you guys are actually able to, like I said, not even in like a negative sense, but if a coach is like, hey, I don't know, this guy just doesn't have like this or doesn't have X, or right. And you're able to like actually give some feedback because you are there, right?
Right. Oh yeah. Definitely. All the time. Also like slow down video, like break things down. Ground contact times and things like that. Actually show guys, how things that we do in the weight room actually transfers. You know what I mean? Like, hey, like on this play you did this. Like the ground contact time was this. Well, in the weight room, exercise that we do also express ground contact times that are similar. Hey, most likely, in terms of specificity, we're going to get some transfer there.
Sure.
So definitely, yeah, like breaking down movements. In terms of like negative movements and things like that, like that happens all the time. Like you said, like man, like, oh man, he's slow. Well, actually, I mean, the guy called out the wrong screen, so I mean, he was anticipating something else. But
exactly,
that happens all the time. It's part of the game. But yeah, in terms of just the specificity in the weight room and speed sets, stuff like that, it's great just looking at the ground contact times and actually slowing things down and showing guys like, hey, like this is how this transfers. You know what I'm saying? So this is the why to everything. So yeah, it's big time for me, man. Like I said, everything that we do, I'm there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And so kind of getting into that, right? Like I would imagine some of the things you were able to pick up from FAU and some of the other places that you've stopped along the way. Obviously, specifically, you mentioned, Joey a few times. Are there specific things that you're implementing now, with men's basketball that you kind of, I'm sure, right, like took from some of these places and kind of like collaboratively put these things together, right? Like I think a lot of people would say that they're, they embody what all of their experiences are, right? And they try to like pick and choose like what they take from, different people or whatever, and kind of make it their own. What would you say some of those like concepts are, whether they're strength and conditioning related or just like, philosophically, overarching themes of how you want to approach, your interactions with other humans and players, whatever the case is? What are some of those like principles and philosophies that you feel like you've taken from these places?
Gotcha, man. Well, like my training philosophy completely changed whenever I got to FAU. You know what I'm saying? So like before, I was real big and in the weight room, like, oh, the weight room matters and everything we do in the weight room. But I'm like, honestly, the weight room is a tool to enhance, the sport, because the sport is the main thing. It's not always about the weight room, So but even before that, you can argue like the only thing that matters before that is movement. You know what I mean? So vertical jump, if that's going up, your sprint times, if that's going up. Those are the only things that matter. The weight room is a tool to get those things to increase, right?
Sure.
So I get way more excited about a guy that added 3 inches on his vertical rather than a guy that added 10 pounds on the squat. You know what I mean? That's just me. Everybody might be a little bit different, but that's just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it changed completely, man. It made me realize, like training is a tool. It's a tool to get a response that we want. That's going to help the athletes adapt, super compensate, and ultimately get better at their sport, applying forces to the ground, being more efficient with applying that force. That's the thing that matters the most, So everything that I've learned from my past guys, Coach Greg, Coach Joey, all the other sisters I work with, that's what it's always about. It's always about movement, athletic principles, rather than just what we're doing in the weight room in terms of weight. But yeah, some of the things that I'm doing is I do speed work with my basketball guys. Twice a week, we were doing speed work in the summer. Again, that was a new thing that I brought. They were like, yeah, we never did this. It honestly looks like track practice rather than strength conditioning. Well, I'm like, okay, well, honestly, track practice, that's what it is. It's off-season strength conditioning. That's what it is. Hurdle hops, wicket running, sprints, time sprints, acceleration running, and stuff like that. Like, that's what we're doing, and it was fun. It was fun. Like the guys had a lot of fun with it. At the same time, it was beneficial for us because it's a new stimulus that these guys haven't received before. So, what's going to happen? They're going to explode. You know what I'm saying? Like we got guys that added, full mile per hour on their top speed. We got guys that really increased their 10-yard sprint by like a whole second or 2 seconds, things like that. So these things that we're doing, a tenth of a second, sorry, not a full second. But
I was gonna say,
like all these things that we're doing is the new stimulus, so the guys are receiving it and they're getting benefits fast, you know what I'm saying? So we got a lot of success in that 6 weeks that we did it. So verticals went up, time sprints weren't up, everything, so it's just something that I consider important and something I'm definitely going to implement every off season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it might make for a little more like interesting of a podcast if I could actually provide some sort of like pushback to that. But I'm the same way. Like I really do feel strongly about like where I got to, especially in like the later parts of my collegiate career, where I was like, man, I don't really know like how much value this weight room stuff is having. Like I think I know the value that it's having. I just don't know like how big of a picture or how big of a piece of the pie that needs to be. Right. So like, and I think a lot of people do get there. Like I don't want to say that as if it's some like really like novel thing. It's just I think it's really you get to a point where you're like, all right, like what are the velocities that they move out on the field, and like, okay, well, these things that we're doing in the weight room are nowhere near that's like how much transfer can they truly have, right? But can they support some of the things like sprints, jumps, and throws, which are going to then help support some of the things that actually matter on the field? So I do think that there's some value there. And that's awesome that you're doing some speed work with the basketball team. Like I felt like, whenever I've worked with basketball, I was kind of just like, it doesn't make sense that this sport does not do like any sort of like sprint work. You know what I mean? I'm like, like when you watch the sport, like any obviously it's like any other team sport, but like when you watch basketball, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, we just, kind of get them in some, and I don't even know, like, yeah, I think like there's probably some value in just exposing them to some like basic principles of sprint preparation. But at the same time, like, they sprint in such specific ways at times, right? And it varies from like, different angles to different situations, right? Whether it's like, turning around from grabbing a rebound to passing and then sprinting, whether it's like full court, whether it's like, what I mean? There's so much, like, because obviously their sport is played in a vacuum. Like the court isn't that big, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not a football field, right? So it's like, it's very, very small. So there's a lot of things going on there, but yeah, I 100%, man, that's awesome that you're doing that stuff. And I bet the basketball coach probably love that stuff. The kids probably love it too. Cause like, to be honest, it's like, they feel like they're actually like training, right? Because for a while it was just like, basketball players, like they just want to play basketball, right? Like it was just like, I just want to ball and I don't want to lift because like, I don't want to mess up my J, right? Like, and it's like now, like, do they kind of give that feedback? Like, hey, I actually enjoy sprinting and jumping and throwing med balls and all that kind of stuff, and actually doing some of these things more than just going and lifting weights and doing that. So they view training a little differently.
Oh yeah, definitely, man, definitely. Like that's just important of education too, as well. You know what I'm saying? Like why we do things in the weight room, but it's just the culture that we're providing here, but like our guys love the weight room. Like I'm just saying, like I get what you're saying. Like many hoopers, like when I first got here, like hoopers, they did not like lifting. You know what I'm saying? Like lift for what? And I get it too, because I mean at the same time they're recruited to play basketball. They're not recruited to play the lift weights. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I get it. It's a tool that sometimes gets pushed to the side, but this group that we have now, man, they love lifting, man. I think I think that goes with the environment more than anything. You know what I'm saying? When you push competition more than anything, I think that's really when you're going to get the most out of your guys. Because, when you're doing something in the weight room, if you ain't got the intent, then, I mean, some people argue you're just spinning your wheels. You're not going to get anything out of it, So it's definitely different from doing a squat at 70% at 0.75 on a tendo versus 0.4. That guy that's doing that 0.75 is going to get a way different training effect than that guy that's moving that weight a lot slower.
Yeah.
So the intent for me is everything. It's the difference maker. So for me, I want to create an environment that the athletes are going to thrive in. I want to push competition, because at the end of the day, like that's what's going to get that buy-in. That's what's going to get that intent level way, way higher. Is that competitive atmosphere, that competitive environment. So that's what I strive to give. That's what we give at practice. That's what we give at conditioning, speed sessions, weight room, everything. We give that same environment to everything that we do. Because at the end of the day, we want the guys to get better. So we want to thrive and get better. So that's the environment that we want to promote there all times.
Yeah. So kind of building off that, right? You said like when you got there, obviously like, basketball players didn't necessarily like you've created a culture, right? And you created sort of an environment where they value these things that you're doing. How did you go about doing that when you first got there? You probably talked a little bit about, I know you mentioned some of the why stuff, but I'm trying to imagine, right? Like how you can completely shape that for all the coaches who are probably taking on new positions right now. It's like, what can they do, right, to kind of step into a new environment where maybe training is viewed in a certain way and looked at through a certain lens, and provide a culture where the kids love it.
Yeah. The first thing I would say is well, first of all, there's a little bit about me. I'm not a hands in the pocket type dude. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a guy that's gonna be in the corner, my hands in my pocket, like, oh, nice job. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm coaching, I'm intense, I'm in your face at all times. You know what I'm saying? And again, that's big for the buy-in, because the guys need to know that you're there for them. You know, like if I was a guy, I use this example all the time. Like if I was a guy, if lift starts at 7 a.m. and you're at the door at 6:55 and the lights are off in there, and here I am coming around the corner, swinging my whistle with my coffee in my hand. Like, is that a guy that you would actually trust with your development as a player? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? So the environment and the body language that you have with your guys, it has to match the message to what you're doing in the weight room, you know, what you're doing in the skill work or the speed session, wherever it is. You know what I'm saying? It has to match. You know, if I'm like, oh, you guys got to have the energy, you guys got to bring the juice, you guys got to bring this culture in here, and then I'm like swinging my whistle in the corner, my hands in my pocket. I mean, that's really not, like, I'm not living out the message that I want. So the first thing is you got to be a presence on the floor coaching. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm in your face, I'm intense. They're just the way I was raised in the strength conditioning industry, I guess. You know, the guys that I was with, you know, we say, you know, coach an eye in the storm, stay an eye in the storm, coach every single rep like it's your last, you know. So I stand by that 100%. So that's the environment that we set. You know, it all starts with me and my presence that I have on the floor. And then just make sure that it's an environment that the guys actually want, you know. So we blast music. We're loud, like whatever the guys want to listen to. If you want to listen to Young Boy, I'll blast Young Boy. If you want to listen to Katy Perry, I'll blast Katy Perry. Whatever you want. Like, this environment is for you. It's not for me. Yeah. And if music is a big part of our culture and what we do, then hey, we're going to take advantage of it 100%. So the biggest thing that you can do for the culture sometimes is give the kids that aux. I'm telling you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Give the kids that aux and let them go to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that I would like, as I'm listening to time, I'm just thinking about it, because like there's places that I've trained before where like obviously that hasn't been the case, right? And I'm always just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's fun every once in a while, maybe like throw something out. Like, I know like sometimes like on like Friday, I would like throw on like something like crazy, like weird, you know what I mean? They go like, what is this crazy stuff? Like you said, like throw on some like Katy Perry or like whatever, like, you know, but that kind of thing. But like most of the time it was like fun for a little bit. But like, yeah, you let these dudes, like, you know, I would try to do something where it's like each day, like somebody would kind of like choose who they wanted to be on the aux, you know what I mean? Like there's always like that one dude who's just a straight up DJ, like, you know what I mean? Like he's got all the playlists, or like there's always one, and like, you know, it becomes like this unanimous decision amongst the group of like, hey, that's our guy. Like, yeah, he's got the aux today, you know what I mean? And so like, that's awesome. But so yeah, man, like that's great stuff. Like obviously, I think the central message there would be like, yeah, go coach these dudes. Like, because I think that's one thing I picked up like over the years, like working in like obviously, like, you know, now I'm working like private sector is a little bit different, and I'm working with some like general population, right? And at first I was like, how am I going to make this transition? Or like, how am I going to do this where like I'll go from like athlete, like, you know what I mean? The motivational levels are a little bit different. Like, how do I find motivate? How do I provide value or whatever? And it's interesting. Like a lot of people will be like, yeah, dude, honestly, like I didn't really want to go do my thing today, but like seeing how invested you are in what is going on, it just made me feel like I had to go do it. You know what I mean? And so like whatever that means, like obviously they, you know, it's a little, like I said, it's a different setting. It's a different way of thinking about things, but in their mind, like they're not a Division I athlete anymore, right? They may be like 40 years old, just trying to like hang on to what was, right? Like a former athlete, right? So it's like, yeah, you know, it's a little bit different, but that's awesome that you're in a situation there where it's like, yeah, the main takeaway is like, go out and coach these dudes, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like male, female athletes, like they love to be coached up. They want to know the why, they want to know what's going on. And obviously they're going to give you the type of feedback that you want, right? And the feedback that you need, and you shouldn't be afraid of any of that feedback either, right? Like I'm sure these dudes aren't afraid to let you know how they feel about certain things. They're Division I athletes, like they got there because they have some sort of drive, they have some sort of motivation, they have a little bit of an edge too, right? So like I think like that's always a tough part too for a lot of coaches, and I don't know if that's something you've experienced where like the initial phase of like that initial moment when feedback, like you actually start to get feedback from athletes, and it might not be exactly what you're looking for, or maybe articulated or communicated in a way that might not be like, you know, friendly to the ear, right? You might be like, yo, is this dude pressing me right now? Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, how do you like approach some of that? Because my opinion was always like, at first I'm like, yeah, all right, this, you know, young kid, he probably thinks, you know, he probably saw something on Instagram, whatever the case is, right? And, you know, you try to like, but like, I think like my thing was always like, just try to provide, like you said, some education around it, you know what I mean? And show them that like, you don't have any insecurity about being questioned about your methods kind of thing. Would you kind of be in line with that a little bit?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Always ask questions, man. Always ask questions. I mean, it's about their development, you know. So like you said, like especially like with social media, all the things that you see could be some good stuff, some bad stuff, some crazy stuff. You know what I mean? But yeah, especially like with all things like that going around, you know, of course the guys are going to question it. You know, it happens. It's always. I'm like, please question me, because if you question me and I can't give your answer, that shows I'm in conflict. I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Yeah. So. Please ask me questions, because at the end of the day, it shows that I know the information. It shows that I'm providing you, you know, the best training that's for your development. So Yeah, definitely. Always encourage questions. I'm always encouraging the feedback from the dude. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so kind of like getting into that now, like talking about like one thing I want to talk about is like good and bad experiences, right? Because I think that that's something like, especially myself, as you know, if I'm listening to a podcast, like I want to be able to hear like the raw stuff, right? So it's like good and bad experiences in the world of strength and conditioning, right? You kind of start to like think about like, all right, who you are now, right?
yeah.
What would you say? We'll start off with some like the good experiences that you think that you've had that have kind of shaped who you are now, right? And what you've become, right? And it could be something as simple as obviously just, you know, hey, like you said, you're around some good dudes, right? Or it could be like specific scenarios, specific instances that you feel have kind of like allotted you like, okay, like this is shaped who I am. We'll start with like the positive stuff and then we can get into some of the negative stuff, right? That may have like altered some of the ways that you think and view things as well. But yeah, we'll start off with the positive stuff. Good vibes on a Friday.
Good vibes. Yeah. So one of the things that, I mean, honestly, this happened recently. Not really a good thing, but I'm going to take, I'm just going to tell you what happened. Okay. So, we had a guy on the team. He actually had a death in the family. Okay. So, somebody he lost that was close to him, and he just deals with death differently than most people, so he's grieving, he's by himself. He doesn't really, make himself available to people. He doesn't like attention, just the way he is, which is fine, so, whenever it happened, just send out text, hey man, like thinking of you, like let me know if you need anything, praying for you, all that good stuff. So he's missing practice, he's missing weights, he's missing everything because, like I say, he needs time. About 3 days go by and like nobody's seen him, like nobody's heard from, nobody's seen him. Don't get me wrong, we're still texting him and he's liking the message and everything, so he's okay, but he just to himself. And out of blue one day he just texts me, hey, can we get a lift? So I'm like, I look at time, I'm like, yeah, definitely, yeah, come on, come get a lift, So he comes in just like arm farm type stuff, 30-minute lift. A 30-minute lift turns to a 3-hour lift, so we're just in there talking, so we're just talking, talking shop, just talking about everything. And then, I'm like, hey man, like how's things going? Everything's like, he's like, yeah, just been to myself pretty much. Like, oh, you got a girl? He's got a girl. I was like, yeah, I ain't seen her too much. What you been doing? Just sitting in my room, just on the game, on the phone, stuff like that. So, and I'm like, so I'm the first human interaction you've had since you heard that news? He's like, well, yeah. So for me, that's an eye opener in everything. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's bigger than sets of reps. It's bigger than the weight on the bar and everything. Like if I could be the first human interaction like a kid can think of whenever he's going through something like that, like that's big time for me. That's a game changer for me. So that's really something recently. That's really just keep focusing on developing the person I am. It's all about relationships. Like I said, it's bigger than sets of reps. It's actually about making an impact, being a positive impact for these dudes. I know a lot of people say it all the time, but it's servant leadership, man. It really is. It's taking the needs and wants of other people and putting them before your own. So that just reinforced the idea and the belief for me. It's really the why. Because strength conditioning is honestly it's the purest form of coaching. You know what I mean? Like there's no wins and losses involved. There's no like differences in culture. I'm saying? I'm going to treat my walk-on the same day I'm going to treat my starter that gives me 20 and 10 a game. Everybody's the same whenever they step foot in the weight room or whatever the case may be. So you have the opportunity to give the same amount of development and attention and love to everybody that steps foot in your program. You know what I'm saying? There's no favorites. Everybody gets the same amount of development. I know the goals and short-term goals and long-term goals of everybody on my team. This guy wants to be in the NBA. This guy wants to be a coach. This guy wants to have his own clothing brand. This guy wants to have a business. So everything. And what I preach and what I give to the guys is for their own development, So a strength coach, like you have the utmost like ability to have a big impact on the guys that you coach. I don't know if you realize it or not, but you can be a big impact on the guys that you coach because one, you spend the most time with them. Two, it's pure. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no other stuff, extracurriculars, wins or losses. I got to win this game, so I got to do this. Nothing. It's nothing like that. And then three, everybody gets held to the same standard. So you have the ability to have the biggest impact that you want on your guys, in terms of your staff. So you have that opportunity, take advantage of it every single day because I want to get invited to weddings. I want to be there when you get that dream job. I want to be a small part of your development process. So It's servant leadership 100%, man.
Yeah, that's wild, man. That's a great story. Good for you, man. That's awesome, and I'm sure that that's a, it's a complicated situation, but it's awesome to hear that you're able to have that kind of. I'm sure that hits home for sure. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah,
awesome to hear. And yeah, and like that is wild that like that you were like the first. You know what I mean? I'm not surprised. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's something that you're doing there that he felt like, hey, I want to reach out to David. Like I want to hit him up first. Like maybe it is that like neutrality of the position, which I've never really thought about that before, to be honest. Like obviously I'm aware that there are no wins and losses and all that stuff, but to be honest,
yeah,
I think a lot of times we get looped into that stuff from like a job security perspective, right? So like it's hard to like lose sight of that, but I think you're right. Like, yeah, it kind of is like the purest form of coaching. It's really just like, there are no like constraints to it. It's like I'm literally here. Like I don't care like what, there's no depth chart, right? Like it's just like we're just out here trying to coach you in this particular like area of your performance, right? Like this whole like training aspect thing. Like we're gonna coach you in this kind of thing. So yeah, I think like especially as like like I'm 31 now, so it's like you start to think about things like, all right, like what exactly does it mean to have an impact? And like, you start to think about crazy stuff. So you're like, damn, like this world is so big and I'm just one dude. And it's like, you're only here for like, maybe like 80 years or some shit like that. Right. And then you're like,
right.
What exactly can I do? Like how big of a range and a reach can you have? And like, who do you choose to impact? And like all that kind of stuff. But I think that that's the one thing that kind of makes strength and conditioning a little bit more appealing, is because you feel like at the end of the day, like, all right, like I'm doing something here where like, yeah, like when you get like a kid to say, I'm going to reach out to him first, or I want to, they use the word like proud sometimes, you know what I mean? Like that stuff always got me when an athlete was like, hey, don't worry, coach, we're going to make you proud. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's an interesting word to use. Like that's, it's kind of like you got a little bit of like a, mentor, kind of like a guy, you're a guider in essence, you know what I mean? And I think that that's awesome stuff. I guess my next question, would be obviously the flip side of that. Like, what are some of the negative experience that you feel you've experienced in the field of strength and conditioning that have kind of, for better or for worse, kind of made you who you are today?
Yeah. Not really say experiences. Honestly, like I haven't really had anything negative to say about like any place that I've been. It's just my experience. I haven't had anything I'll say like, wow, like that really, hit home, that really, changed me and stuff like that. So this is from my experience. I haven't had anything, but some things that I see is social media for sure, man. Like it's, whenever you look at, I think Twitter is probably the most toxic out of all of them. You see people on Twitter, coming at, so-and-so because they do this and because they have different mindsets from you. And so you're tweeting bad about them. And I'm like, dude, this is just like so petty. Like it's insanely petty, man. I think that's killing the industry, man, because it's like people see it, you know what I'm saying? Like that post, I think it was the Louisiana Tech post when they made about the job posting, the assistant posting. So like my players, like my coaches on staff, they saw that. They were like, oh wow, is this true? And all that. I'm like, look, dude, like you'd be surprised like how far this stuff actually gets. And I think that's why like some of the times we're not respecting in profession. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're a strength coach, like, oh, you this and that, all that's going on in your field. And they don't see the good. The only thing they see is the tweets that go viral, like that tweet. Or
what was that tweet? Was that the one about like the low paying position or something like that?
Yeah, it's about the assistant position. And like I said, again, they had nothing was going on with the insights or, like what they're doing from a HR perspective. They have nothing was going on. Only thing they see is that. That's the only thing they see, and they're like, oh, who would do that? That's the meaning and everything like that. I'm like, dude, like you don't even know like nothing. So that's one of the things that goes viral when people see, and it blows up, and that's negative boost to the field, because I do think it's a great field. I do think it has some problems, but it's definitely headed in the right direction. And that's just my opinion. I think it's headed in the right direction. So social media, the bad stuff gets promoted, the good stuff gets overlooked. That's my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say some of the good things about the field are currently, if you had to really kind of go through and like work through it, right? Because it's like, I think, it's kind of like one of the questions I like to ask is like, where do we need to go moving forward? But like I guess we could start off like, what are some of the great things that you feel that this field has to offer that, at least you've experienced and you've been afforded?
Yeah, so this is another recent experience. One of the best things that's up and rising is coming around. I think it's definitely going to take over in a little bit. is youth training, getting out to high schools, getting out to middle schools and stuff like that. I think that is crucial in terms of long-term performance for the guys. And there's some guys that are in high school and middle school in the private sector and in school settings that are absolutely killing the game right now, right? And we had a freshman, so I got 2 freshmen that came in. I got one that's never lifted before, and I got another one that's had a great strength coach in high school, private sector, and he's just developing so fast. Like we do like a block zero type program with the freshmen, so to speak, and he just blazed through it. Like he's ready to be thrown in the group with the guys, and like, that took 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Because he knows how to do all the stuff. He does it effectively. He does it efficiently, and it looks clean. It looks smooth. He's like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm like, oh, that's great. It makes sense. And I got this other guy that's never lifted before who's in the block zero for 7 weeks because I have to teach him how to do everything. So in terms of, long-term performance and development, youth training is going to take off. I think that, in the next 10 years, I think every high school is probably going to have a certified strength coach on staff that's going to be leading, the team. So I do think it's important. I do think it's going to take off here soon.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I totally agree. I was saying that to somebody, I think it was yesterday, but it was actually brought up in one of our meetings, and it was just like, you're talking about like where, what we think, we can do to provide like more value to like the company or whatever. And my answer was, I was like, you know what, honestly, if we ever got in a place where it was like, hey, we're gonna really start like pushing, like getting into high schools and getting into just like younger, like youth organizations, whether it be like, professional organizations that are like recruiting or whatever, colleges or whatever the case may be. And then you got like your high schools, you have like, like for example, you got like AAU camps, you got like juniors for hockey, like all that stuff. I'm like, if you could get there where it's not even just providing like education, but like to like the athletes, but like getting into high schools where it's like, hey, we're going to legitimately start providing more information to just like everybody, like anybody who, is anybody, right? Because obviously they're going to, whether you're an athlete or not, like you have a fitness journey, right? You know what I mean? And obviously like, I think it's, obviously like I'm in the sense where like, I think about that a little bit more than I did when I was working in, college sports or whatever. So like, obviously you're focused in an athlete world, right? So it's like, yeah, but like I think it's so crucial. Like I just like starting them young and then getting them to a point where they have a healthy outlook and a healthy relationship with training, and they're not viewing it as something that's like, I need to like punish myself for like, eating poorly, or I need to like, I need to do this so that I can go out and drink with my buddies this weekend kind of thing. And like, obviously understand like training principles and like, understanding how to operate in a weight room, how to be safe, how to be efficient, all those things. Like there's so many benefits that come from that. But if you could start, but like the problem is there's not like a ton of consensus around how to go about doing that, I think. But I think like eventually if you were to able to have that, if you were to be like, all right, like, hey, listen, we're going to hop into this high school and we're going to have a philosophy as to like how we're going to go about approaching things. It doesn't have to be like one way. It's just like an overarching theme of like how we want to, kind of push these things and get some of these messages across to like younger adults and people who are obviously going to be venturing out into the world. And honestly, like all those dudes you're working with now, like I'm pretty sure most of those guys all grew up on the internet, right? Like I think like, so like they yeah, like any college kid now, right? Were they born past 2000, right? Like they would have to be, right? Like it has to be like 2002 or whatever. So it's like, yeah, because my brother's 20 and he was born in 2002. So like, yeah, you know what I mean? That makes sense. So it's like, I think they all grew up with smartphones. Like they all grew up on the internet, like totally different. You know what I mean? Like their outlook on things is going to be so different. So like, yeah, man, I think getting into the high schools would be huge. That'd be unbelievable. Really, like just to provide guidance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. It's a game changer for sure. It's a game changer for sure. It's coming though. It's coming. It's coming for sure. It's coming.
Well, kind of moving forward then, I just, we got like a few minutes left here. I don't know. Are you doing okay on time? I'm not like pressing you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
All right. So, one of the things I like to do is obviously like you have a ton of knowledge, right? And you've picked these things up from experiences, but what are some of like the resources that you feel have really kind of shaped the way that you view things, whether it be like books, podcasts, people, seminars, workshops, whatever, or just some of the things that you do that you really feel like benefit you in terms of like your development as a person and as a coach?
Yeah, I got you. The first thing I consider important is to reach out to as many guys as I can in the field. Guys that are doing a lot better than me. Guys that are have ownership of certain areas. They've expanded certain areas that I think is important. So for me, you know, one of the things I'm looking at expanding here at Solid is our nutrition. You know, so I'm looking at how to get our nutrition up to par, to which I think would be good for our guys, right? So I'm reaching out to guys that you know might have started off, you know, low on nutrition, might have started off with a low budget, and they sort of just built that up to where they have, you know, a nutritionist, they have interns, things like that, like ways to actually expand nutrition for us. So whichever area that I look at improving, I want to talk to guys that have actually, you know, done that. You know what I'm saying? So reaching out to guys in the industry that are a lot better than me, a lot smarter than me, have actually expanded things in areas that I consider important for our guys. Now, with continuing education and books, you know, books that I think are important is one, I'm always referencing advanced strength and conditioning. That's one of my top books in the field for anybody. I don't care if you're a young coach, old coach, whatever, just like the principles and, you know, things that I go about in my training are referenced a lot in that book. And that's something that I got sticky notes in. That's something that I look at all the time, you know. So advanced strength and conditioning is definitely one of my top books for anybody that wants to do a future read, or anybody that's just like referencing training ideas, concepts, and things like that. Number two is a recent one I read, Force Dan Cleather. That's a good book. I think that it's a challenging book. I think that it'll really open up your eyes in terms of training and what you're actually training for. I know it took me a while to read. It took me, you know, 3 days to read like 2 pages in it, just because I'm thinking about it so much. But it's a good book. It's a good book for sure. And then the last one that I referenced, I probably read this book once every 6 months, The 12 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's a great book for me. That's a great book for anybody that's in any type of leadership role, any type of role that you know, you have others that you're leading or guiding, you know, so coaches, teachers, even somebody in the medical field, anybody, any area that you have a small group that you're taking ownership of, it's one of my top 5 reads, for sure. That's definitely a book that I go back every 6 months and read, just because everything that we do as coaches, you know, sort of shows up in that book, and actually shows, you know, how you apply it to your life and how it actually applies to the others that you're affecting and impacting. So those are my top 3. Like I said, a lot of my stuff comes out from reaching to other people, networking, you know, because I want to see what other people are doing better than what I'm doing now, you know. So
that's awesome. Force sounds like a pretty heavy book then, huh? You know, I'm like, there's like these books, I've like, there's been a couple books like that for me, like literally take me like, and it's not that I'm like, it takes that long. It's like, you need to take that long in order to like actually absorb all the information. Like that's how I felt like reading some of like Franz Bosch's books, be like, dude, this is like what is this? You know what I mean? It's like I would take me like half a year to read a book. You know what I mean? I'm like, you'd be like, oh, you're still reading that book? I'm like, yeah, man. I read like 5 pages. I mean, maybe like a max of like, you know, 10 pages a night. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. I try to like, you know, recite. You know, I don't know if you remember Andrew Smith. You remember Andrew Smith? He was with he was at UK. So he and I would like do some reading over code. And I remember be like, all right, what we did, we created this Google Doc. We're gonna read the book. You know, we each read 10 pages a night. I think it was Franz Bosch's book, Running. And it was like read 10 pages a night and then drop your notes in there and then put them like under my notes or whoever gets to it first, kind of thing. Right.
Nice.
And then like I would like read 10 pages and then I would go upstairs and I brush my teeth and I try to like recite in my head like all the things that I thought were like super relevant and everything. And then it's like, the note, and it's like it was helpful or whatever, but it's like that's how slowly we had to move through that book. It was like maybe 10 pages a night. You know what I mean? It was like it was that heavy. So I mean, and sometimes, you know, sometimes that's how it rolls. And sometimes you get more out of those books. You know what I mean? I think it's better to stay with something for longer as opposed to just like smashing a bunch of different books. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. Even just like topic hopping, you know what I'm saying? Like I do it, like I know other people do it, like getting in the rabbit hole and stuff. But I mean, if I'm gonna look at a topic, I'm gonna dive hard into it. You know what I'm saying? So say I want to look at eccentrics. All right, well, I'm gonna spend the next 2 weeks just looking at eccentrics. You know what I mean? And eccentric training and effects and things like that. So pick one topic and study to a teeth, man. Just focus on that one topic.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's way better for sure. And I think the leadership books, especially in strength and conditioning, are always good. It's interesting. You go back and read that every 6 months. I wish I had that kind of discipline with some books. It's like, that's probably where I do fall short. Is like, I'll read a book. I'm like, all right, sweet. Like I did what I needed to do to get the most out of this thing. But like going back and reading it again is like, there's too many others that I got to get to. I got to start this next one now. You know what I mean? It's almost like a checklist of things you're trying to knock off. But that's good. You find something that like sticks. You know what I mean? And some, you know, and do you feel like some of the, what what are some of the things from that book that you feel like are like your main 1 to 2 takeaways that you feel like without a doubt, secondhand nature is just something that you apply to your life now without even having to like think about it?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just basically the servant leadership part of coaching. You know what I'm saying? Like, make sure that everything that you're doing is actually impacting the other person. You know what I mean? Because you have to really think about, the things that you're doing and how it's actually going to affect the people that you're actually serving. You know what I mean? So just some of the takeaways from the book. I mean, it just talks about sacrifice, like law of sacrifice, the law of actually implementing, putting other people first. And then there's the stories in the book that actually like go back and tells like the stories of like, oh, this person did this and gave away this to impact this person, so and so. So it's actually not exactly the book, but how it actually goes back and references the stories in the book to actually show like, hey, this is how this law is being applied to the everyday life of this person, and this is how it can relate to your life too. So this foreshadowing with the stories is good for anybody that's struggling to actually relate it. Because I mean, you read these things, you're like, okay, well, how does it actually relate to me? And like, oh wow, like it relates to that guy that did this. Like, okay, so this is how it's picked up in my life too. So this foreshadowing, going back and telling the stories, it's good for anybody.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That sounds really healthy. Like, it sounds like very like I don't know, I feel like there's books that just provide peace of mind, you know what I mean, kind of like brings you back, like centers you a little bit, and I think that sounds like it's one of them for sure.
Yep.
So final question, and I'll let you go. I got to know, you know what I mean, if there's any sort of like final like words that you would like us to know. Me, like, obviously I've learned a ton on this podcast, even just talking to you. I really appreciate the insight that you provided and the different like lens that you've allowed me to look at things through. Any final words for myself, for the listeners, that you really feel like, hey, like here on, what's today's date, August 5th, right? That you really want to impart on us, because it'd be cool. Like, you could look back at this, in, I don't know, 5-6 years and be like, hey, like what I would impart on them in terms of wisdom, maybe a little bit different now than it was then. Maybe things are different. That's fine. But here today, on this Friday, what are some of like your final words that you would like us to know, and things that you really want to, and a message that you really want to get across to us as listeners?
Gotcha. Yeah, man. So final message I leave is really just figure out, how you add value to people. I think that goes to everybody in whatever career path you choose. Just figure out, what's your purpose and how you actually add value to the people that you're around. At the end of the day, like, that's the most important thing for everything. Like I said, whether you're a coach, teacher, medical field, anything, how you add value to people is ultimately how you find your purpose in what you're doing. So
Yeah.
I found mine. I'm sticking with it. It's just my purpose. I wake up every day with a purpose, air in my lungs. So I love taking advantage of it every single day. Being around my guys, being around the people that I'm serving. So find your purpose, serving leadership, and is add value to the people, man.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that. And I'm really happy that you have found that, right? Because anybody can wake up in the morning and actually, put their feet on the ground and feel like they have something that they're going to deliver on that day, and something that they're going to be a part of. Then yeah, that's a healthy way to live. It's probably that's the pie in the sky right there. So I'm glad, man. I'm happy for you. Congratulations on everything you've been able to achieve. And yeah, man, thank you for hopping on the podcast. This is awesome. This is great stuff, great insight. There's a lot of fun to learn from you. Like I said before we got on, I was like, man, I get to talk to somebody today that I've never really talked to, or at least I have, but I haven't talked to obviously recently. So it's good to catch up with you, man. But yeah, appreciate you. For the listeners, we'll catch you guys next time. But David, thank you again, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Appreciate you, man. Hey, don't be a stranger too. Don't be a stranger.
Yeah, no, I gotta hit up. I'm gonna hit you up. I'm gonna slide in your DMs a little bit more now. You know what I mean? I get you. You're big time now. You're big time. So, but no, for sure, man. Yeah, and I'll be in touch pretty soon here too. So thank you very much. I appreciate it again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.